Well, it is the middle of May, and we've got something kind of interesting going on in the garden here, where it makes you ask the question, are these vegetables or are these weeds pretending to be vegetables? So today's food for thought. What really makes a vegetable and not a weed? Because what I'm about to show you here really strongly suggests that some of the most invaluable vegetables may actually be extremely weedy given the right circumstances. But that's okay. That's actually great. And even though we're big proponents of seed saving, etc., we can still make this work. And I'm going to show you what I mean here. So we're going to start here on this raised bed. And for those of you who have been following us for a while, we had some red Russian kale and some drumhead cabbage in sort of these two beds that we let go to seed. Now they're biannuals, so it was a bit of a process, worked really well. And as you can see, I'm going to zoom in here, red Russian kale reseeds itself extremely prolifically. And this is just one bed. If I come over here, there's a whole lot more. I've said this before, that some of the best vegetables or things to grow to eat that are plants are the ones that want to grow like weeds. And I think what I've just shown you about the red Russian kale, that is hands down exactly what it wants to do. Now the seeds that are in those raised beds, they just overwintered in the bed. So they've fallen off the plant before we collected all the seed, and we've ended up with like hundreds of them, which is a good problem to have. But they weren't the only plant to do that. So in this bed, as you can see here, and in this bed here, these little leafy seedlings. If anybody recognizes that, it's dill. Now the dill we grow, dill kind of gives itself away, dill weed. The dill that we grow actually started out in this bed. But last year, it seeded this bed. As you can see, there's very little of it left in this bed, which is fine because that kind of works in a bit of a natural succession. There's a couple. But it seeded this bed. We had quite a crop growing in here. It's reseeded itself again, and it's now seeded this bed. So we have this roving dill carpet that slightly changes its position year to year. Now, fortunately, dill is one of those wonderful things because there's nothing really that crosses with it except for other dill. And quite frankly, most dill is very similar, so once you've picked one that you like, it's not a really big deal that it does this. So this is actually extremely advantageous that it does this. Now, if we wanted to have this in a specific spot, this is a great example where frost seeding would be a huge plus because these plants are basically perfectly timed to the growing season of their like, despite the fact that we are getting a bit of a drought in May. So in some ways, the dill, or dill weed, is one spectrum where it's basically an annual. It will reseed itself prolifically given the opportunity, and you can work with that in your favor to sort of move it around your garden. It won't be entrenched there forever, and you could eradicate it if you really wanted to. Now, we actually want a lot of the actual dill weed part, not the seeds, but the weed dried for this year. So we're going to let a substantial portion of this grow to at least a size that we can harvest it. On the flip side, looking at the kale was interesting because it's a biannual. So the kale takes a little bit more planning. The big problem with the kale is where we live, it does have to be protected as a plant to keep it alive over one winter so that it will seed itself. But once it does, we have so many red Russian kale seedlings. It's crazy. We've transplanted some, we're going to transplant more, and we're going to harvest a lot of red Russian kale. So as far as weedy vegetables go, that's definitely up there. But the next one is probably even more familiar, and you've already seen it if you recognize it growing in amongst the dill. So in this bed, as you can see from all the nice looking red leaves, is some red-leafed romaine. I believe that's what it's called. Now, this has a very similar story because last year it was planted in the front of that bed. and we let a handful of plants go to seed. You can sort of see a few in there as well amongst the kale. But we had a bit of a migration over here. Now again, this has been awesome because we've transplanted some. We are planning to harvest some of these in a few weeks when they're a little bigger. And we've got quite the seed bed that's come up here. And of course, the one thing that's nice about lettuce is, from a seed saving perspective, it doesn't need huge spaces between the varieties. So this was not our only lettuce that went to seed. We also had some butter crunch lettuce, which we've actually already transplanted because we wanted the bed. And we've had some black seeded Simpson that have gone and basically reseeded themselves. Now, this is awesome because lettuce is one of those things that in the early part of the season is weight-wise not a big producer as far as volume, but from a perspective of early spring greens is a great one, right? And so we now have tons of lettuce because we've also started several that we've transplanted out. So this is kind of another one of those blessings because we have tons of mixed salad, but it shows that lettuce, given the opportunity, will be just as weedy as its ancestors as far as spreading in your garden. So again, as people who are fairly adamant about saving seeds and saving varieties that have unique qualities, I mean, the red Russian kale has crazy separation distance, so we really can only grow the one kind of that species, which is different from Brassica oleracea, which is awesome because that means we can still have other brassicas, and this stuff can still go rampant as a weed. The dill, of course, like I said, it's not going to cross with anything else, so it's kind of, it's a simple one. But when we get into the lettuce, you do want to keep track of any varieties that you've let go to seed as to where they were in the garden. Because as you've seen, when you get the migration of lettuce colonizers or lettuce seedlings, you still want to keep them away from each other. But 3 meters is not exactly a hard distance to accommodate. So as an added bonus in this video, my lovely assistant here is going to help me demonstrate something, because even though the lettuce has basically grown feral in our gardens, we can still use it for saving seed, and we can still breed better lettuce because we can still maintain our separation distances of 3 meters. So we're going to visually give you an idea of what 3 meters looks like here. So here we have a patch of cilantro and buttercrunch lettuce, and you can see the patch ends right here. A few of these are going to probably, as long as the weather cooperates, be kept for seed saving. Now, we don't need a lot of individuals for lettuce. But when I turn directly around behind me, you can see another patch of lettuce. So this is a green-leafed romaine. And we're going to show you how far apart these are. Here we go. Stephanie's going over there. So she's at the corner.
This is the closest lettuce to that one.
To this one. And I'm going to the closest here. And how much distance do I need? So, as I am not good with the mental math, I have been told by my lovely assistant that at 460 centimeters, I'm closer to 4 meters.
No, you're over 4 meters.
Over 4 meters. So when I zoom back out from here, and I go to there, you can see that's not a big distance. For more visual context, there's Stephanie, there's the closest romaine. We're about 15 feet to there. It's not a big space. When the lettuce decides to be like a weed, which this romaine has not done that yet, you can still take advantage of it. So, and an added bonus, which a lot of people know it will do this, we also have some feral arugula that has decided to reseed itself. So there's a fourth one. But it really does make you wonder what becomes the difference between what we would normally consider a weed, which is still completely edible by the way, and something we would consider a vegetable. For some, there really isn't a lot of difference. So while I sit beside this feral bed of red leaf romaine lettuce and red Russian kale, I think the take-home message here is frost seeding could actually be done on a much bigger scale with the right species, because at least this suite of species has absolutely no problem with it, and all you need to do is give them a little bit of prime real estate, and they'll do it all for you. So something to consider when you're planting gardens, planting varieties, and planning your planting techniques, because after this unintentional experiment, we are definitely going to be giving frost seeding a much bigger percent of consideration in our garden plans.